Why was Philadelphia holding its breath? The city seemed frozen beneath the rain, as if it knew something terrible was about to happen. Lights shimmered off the glass towers, each window dripping with water. A crowd laughed inside the convention hall, safe and warm, oblivious. But across the river, a different rhythm pulsed. The slow inhale of a marksman. The quiet precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in silence. She lay prone on the rooftop, body pressed flat against the gravel. Wind, pressure, distance, every factor folded into the math inside her head. The world narrowed until only the crosshairs remained. Through her scope, security details in black coats appeared clumsy, their movements predictable. The Secretary of Defense himself strode forward, shaking hands, smiling like a man who believed he was untouchable. Her finger tightened, 4 pounds of force. The rifle whispered instead of roaring, a muted crack quieter than a door closing, and in that moment history bent. The secretary crumpled before his guards could even blink. Panic ignited like fire in dry grass. Sirens screamed across the plaza, people scattered, shouting, reaching for radios, weapons, anything. But on that rooftop there was nothing left. No shooter, no shell, not even a trace of oil or footprint. Only the mark of a ghost. The shot was too clean, too deliberate. Almost no one alive could have pulled it off. Whoever had, they wanted the world to know, precision itself had signed the kill. Miles away, far from the storm of sirens, silence reigned. Fort Wayne, Alaska, a warehouse tucked against the edge of frozen wilderness, lit by buzzing fluorescents. A woman sat alone at a steel workbench, sleeves rolled up. Her hands worked a rifle with the ease of muscle memory, an old M24 that should have been gathering dust. To anyone else, she was just an armory technician. Ordinary, invisible, her ID badge read Riley. She had no combat patches, no medals, nothing that suggested she had ever stepped outside routine. But the way she pulled the bolt assembly free, wiped carbon with practice strokes, oiled grooves and chambers, it wasn't ordinary. It was choreography. Every motion carried the rhythm of years she didn't talk about. The rifle didn't look borrowed. It looked like it belonged to her, as though it had been waiting for her to come back. Broke the quiet, heavy, deliberate. A shadow filled the doorway, and Colonel Mason Drake stepped inside. His boots echoed against the concrete, each step dragging the chill of memory into the room. He said nothing at first, just watched her hands, the fluidity of her movements, the way no supply clerk should ever know how to strip an M24 blindfolded. "You stripped that like you were born to it," he finally said. His voice carried years of sand and smoke, the rasp of a man who had seen enough war to know what he was looking at. Riley didn't glance up. Her mask was well practiced. "Just routine maintenance, sir, before it's shipped out for decommission." Drake stepped closer. His fingers brushed the rifle stock, pausing where the grain of the wood dipped into a faint engraving. A mark burned into it long ago. Subtle but not invisible. A circle of crosshairs, an arc etched above it. To most eyes it would look like wear. To him it was unmistakable. His expression hardened. "Funny thing," he murmured. "That mark belonged to a unit that never officially existed." His gaze locked on hers. "The line program, and your old call sign was shade." The air thickened. Riley's hands froze. For half a heartbeat her mask slipped. Her pulse thudded hard enough she thought he might hear it. Years of hiding, of careful silence, cracked open. But she recovered quickly, too quickly. She forced her voice steady. "You've mistaken me, Colonel." But Drake shook his head slowly, like a man who had already made peace with a truth. He pulled a slim encrypted drive from his jacket and placed it on the workbench beside the rifle she had cleaned too well. "There's a chain of assassinations unfolding," he said. "High-value targets, everyone staged to look like an accident, but the ballistics don't lie. Every shot screams line." Riley said nothing, but her heart knew. The ghost of her past had come knocking. Drake tapped the drive with one calloused finger. The latest victim was General's rival, and every thread leads back to Aegis Vector systems. They're running something called Project I Want You at a meeting, 2100 hours, officers' quarters, room 214. Don't waste time with lies, you know what this is. Then he left her with the rifle, the drive, and silence. The warehouse hummed with fluorescent light, but Riley's thoughts roared. Her eyes lingered on the faint arc sigil burned into the M24 stock, a mark she had once carried like a brand. Shade, the ghost who never missed. She had buried that name 3 years ago. She had built walls of routine, silence, invisibility. But Drake had just spoken it aloud, and now it echoed through her like thunder. That night her apartment felt smaller than usual, too still. She checked every lock twice. She stared at bare walls, second-hand furniture, the life of someone determined not to be noticed. Then, reluctantly, she slid the closet door aside. Her fingers brushed past coats until they found a small panel. 12 digits tapped into a keypad. A soft click. The drywall shifted, revealing the space she had sworn she would never touch again. Inside was her hidden room, a life she had erased, tucked into shadows, weapons sealed in foam, passports with names she no longer answered to, bundles of currency bound tight with rubber bands, and in the center a laptop sealed in a waterproof case. She set it down, slid the encrypted drive inside, and let the files unfold. Ledgers, coded orders, surveillance stills, names, each page whispering the same shadow project. Her breath caught on one image, a grainy photo from a distance, a figure walking away from a burned-out convoy, half-hidden, blurred but unmistakable, broad shoulders, the way he carried his weight, Ward. Her spotter, her partner, the man who had died on a mountainside in Hindu Kush. She had folded his flag. She had saluted his name carved into stone. She had mourned him in silence. And yet here he was, alive in pixels, tangled in orbit. The room seemed to close in. Either Drake had baited her with forgery, or death had never been real. Both possibilities cut like knives. Riley closed the laptop, her jaw set. At 2100 hours she would face Drake. Whether it was a trap or the truth, Shade had no choice. She reached for the M24, reassembling it with mechanical care. Oil still fresh on her hands. The rifle felt too right, too natural, like it belonged in her grip. Outside, Alaska's wind howled against the walls, sharp and relentless. Somewhere between Philadelphia and Fort Wayne, two shadows, the killer in the snow and the ghost in the armory, were already moving toward each other. And Riley, who had promised herself never to touch that world again, knew the silence was over. The ghost had been called back. Why did the door click shut like a warning? Room 214 smelled faintly of dust and stale coffee, curtains drawn, light dim. The space felt less like officer housing and more like an interrogation cell. Riley stood just inside, every muscle wired tight, her eyes cutting to corners and shadows. The M24 wasn't with her this time. Just a sidearm holstered beneath her jacket, and the encrypted drive pressed against her ribs like a secret waiting to detonate. Colonel Mason Drake sat across from her at a small metal table, a folder spread open between them. His posture was casual, but his eyes were sharp, the kind that missed nothing. "Project," he said, his voice steady. "Aegis Vector's brainchild, modeled after line but without restraint. Neural conditioning layered onto skill. They're building shooters who won't hesitate, who won't question, who won't stop." The words landed heavy, each one striking the part of Riley that still remembered what line had been. A program buried in secrecy. A small circle of ghosts, trained not for war but for precision. To move unseen, erase threats before they were born. It was a line Riley had crossed more times than she admitted, but at least line had limits. They were shadows, yes, but they still belonged to something resembling conscience. Sounded like its mirror without a soul. Drake flipped another page, schematics, training footage, budgets hidden in civilian contracts. The evidence spread across the table in thin, damning slices. "They're accelerating," he said. "Headquarters in Portland. The gala at the Oregon Convention Center has been pushed forward. Tomorrow night. Before Riley could form a reply, the lock behind her shifted. A presence slipped inside without sound. She spun halfway, hand on her weapon, then froze at the voice. Izzy Shade. Her breath hitched, the world narrowed. Ward stepped into the light. His face was older. A scar dragged down his cheek. His eyes were the same. The man she had mourned on a mountainside was alive, standing 3 feet from her, breathing. Her weapon stayed half raised. Her voice cracked against years of silence. "You're supposed to be dead." "Supposed to be," said. He nodded toward Drake. "We don't have long. Cleanup crew is inbound. 2 men first, 4 more behind. They'll sanitize this meeting like it never happened." The words shattered hesitation. Drake snapped the folder closed. "Then we move." The 3 of them exited into the freezing corridor. Boots echoed against concrete in a rhythm that felt too loud. Outside, an SUV idled, headlights cut, exhaust curling into the air like smoke signals. Behind the wheel sat Cole, former commander, former patriot, now a fugitive with his name carved across blacklists. His eyes flicked up as Riley slid into the seat, recognition sparking. "Didn't think I'd see the Shade again," he muttered, shifting gears. The vehicle lunged forward. Tires bit into snow, spraying slush behind them as they tore down the road. In the back checked his carbine, eyes darting between mirrors. Riley's pulse struggled to steady. She wasn't sure whether she should be relieved, furious, or afraid. The man beside her was supposed to be a ghost, and yet here he was, his presence dragging old scars back into the light. Cole's voice broke the silence, low and clipped. "Nora, waiting at the safe house. She's pieced together more than anyone, but the window is closing fast." The miles blurred under frost and trees. Each one dragged Riley deeper into the past she had tried so hard to bury. The safe house crouched on the edge of timberland, a squat cabin strung with antenna and faint light glowing behind blackout curtains. Inside smelled of coffee and burnt circuits. Nora greeted them with a headset still looped around her neck, eyes rimmed with fatigue. She shoved a tablet into Riley's hands without preamble. "You're late." Obituaries scrolled across the screen. Officials, scientists, contractors. Each death labeled accident, plane crash, gas leak, heart failure. All too clean, all too coordinated. "Spruining obstacles one by one," Nora explained, her voice sharp with exhaustion. "He wants control of the nuclear chain. Replace enough key holders and the system tips. Isn't theory. It's the knife he's already using." Riley's stomach knotted as she scrolled. Faces she knew from briefings. Names she had once heard spoken in rooms where history was planned. Some she had shaken hands with. All gone. "A slaughter by disguise," she murmured. Drake leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "We stop it in Portland. The gala is the pivot. We move before it locks down." Silence thickened, then spoke flat and sharp. "Unless we can even trust you, Colonel." His eyes locked on Drake, hard as glass. Riley looked up, feeling the air split between them. Dropped another file onto the table. Intercepted chatter. Classified leaks traced through Drake's own channels. "It's been ahead of us for months. Too clean to be coincidence. Someone's feeding them, someone close." Drake's jaw tightened. His reply was steel. "If I were their leak, you'd all be corpses already, think." He pulled a folded photo from his pocket and slid it across the table. A young woman's face stared back. "Cole's daughter." "She's alive," Drake said. "People are holding her at Hillsborough. Leverage, that's why it's been forced silent." His hands tightened against the table until his knuckles went white. He said nothing. His silence spoke louder than words. The revelation cut both ways. Doubt toward Drake, proof he still carried truths only an insider could know. The room coiled with mistrust. Before anyone could press further, alarms wailed. A sharp, mechanical scream that turned blood cold. Nora snapped toward her console. Perimeter feeds glowed red. Headlights sliced through falling snow. Black SUVs rolling fast, plates traced to federal pools. They're here. Cables yanked free, hard drives stuffed into bags, papers shoved into the stove, flames crackling, grabbed rifles tossing them to and Riley. "Out the back," Drake ordered. "No," Riley snapped, already moving. "Stand and fight, we can't win here." Snow swallowed their boots as they plunged into the tree line. Engines revved closer. Beams of light slashed through trunks. Silenced shots hissed, cutting plumes of white into the air. Riley returned fire in short bursts, chewing bark into splinters, giving the others cover to move. Breath froze against her lips. Her pulse pounded in her throat. They reached a second SUV hidden under camo netting. Floored it, headlights off, tires tearing across frozen ground. Pursuers roared behind them, shadows flickering between trees. "Westbound routes are burned," Nora said from the back, her tablet glowing, her fingers flew. "We swing south, Portland's the only chance." Riley pressed against the window, watching black SUVs vanish in the distance. Her chest heaved from the sprint, but her mind locked on the arc looming ahead. Tomorrow meant Portland, a gala thick with targets, money, and lies. Somewhere in the folds of velvet and glass, Project waited like a blade. And Shade, Riley, would have to walk back into the fire. Why did the chandeliers feel like eyes? Portland glowed with glass and steel, its skyline mirrored in rain-slick streets. The Oregon Convention Center rose like a cathedral of politics and power. Floodlights swept across banners draped for the defense gala, where wealth and ambition gathered under the pretense of national security. Inside, champagne flutes sparkled in delicate hands. Conversations hummed over string music, the kind of polished atmosphere where danger hid in plain sight. And through it all moved Riley, though tonight she was Riley at all. Her badge read Riley Hart, Axiom Defense Systems Liaison. Her black dress cut a clean line, functional more than glamorous, heels clicking against marble floors. Each step rehearsed, each smile measured. To anyone watching, she was another contractor in a sea of corporate masks, but under the surface, every nerve inside her hummed. Above, Cole steadied a rifle from an unfinished tower overlooking the OCC. His scope swept entrances, balconies, rooftops. His voice was calm in Riley's earpiece. "Overwatch clear. You're clean. Keep moving." Miles away, Nora sat in a trailer glowing with monitors, her headset biting into her hair. Streams of data rolled across her screens, phone signals, guard rotations, anomalous pings. "I'll ghost your trail," she whispered. "Stay steady, Shade. If anyone gets close, I'll know." Riley lifted a champagne glass she didn't drink and drifted deeper into the exhibition wing. Stalls displayed drone prototypes, guidance systems, laser arrays, products packaged as innovation but built for war. Deals inked here would echo across continents. Every conversation was a bargain in blood, even if the glasses sparkled. Then a familiar presence brushed against her shoulder, Colonel Mason Drake. He looked different here, stripped of battlefield weight. His tie loosened, a glass in hand, the portrait of a man blending in, but his whisper carried the same edge. "Evidence," he murmured, sliding a small packet into her clutch. "Cole's compromised. He's been playing both sides for life." Riley's expression didn't change. Her mask didn't slip. She kept walking, the packet suddenly heavy in her bag. She didn't open it, not yet. Through her earpiece, Cole's voice cut in, low and controlled. "North Corridor, VIP reroute. Lowell's on the move." Deputy Secretary Lowell, the gala's star guest. The man everyone expected on stage in the East Wing, but security had shifted him at the last second. Nora's voice spiked. "That's a funnel. 4 exits, 3 already sealed. Classic kill box. Move." Riley's pulse sharpened. She dropped the glass on a passing tray, heels striking faster against the marble. The North Corridor stretched ahead, dimmer than the rest. Shadows pooled between recessed lights. Lowell walked with 2 aides, his smile rehearsed, oblivious to the danger curling in. Behind him, suits closed the distance. Too uniform, too clean, not guests, operators. "Contact," Riley whispered. She broke into a sprint. One guard reached for his jacket. She slammed into him, elbow cracking ribs, seizing the pistol before it cleared leather. A twist, leverage, 2 shots snapping into the corridor's hush. Another man staggered, crumpled. "Lowell, move," she barked, her voice cutting like command. Confusion flashed across his face, but she shoved him toward a stairwell door. Another operator raised his weapon. Riley spat fire in controlled bursts, muzzle flash strobing shadows. "Roof line," Cole urged. "Get him up." She kicked the stairwell door open, dragging Lowell up slick metal stairs. Her lungs burned. Her ears rang. Her instincts carried her forward. The roof tore open into night air, rain slicing sideways. A rotor beat thunder overhead. A helicopter swung low, painted in news logos, too polished, too precise to be real. Cole's voice again, sharp. "Ride's hours, move." Floodlights strobed across tar and gravel. Riley hauled Lowell inside, rotors throwing spray into her face. Cole appeared from the dark, calm despite the chaos, his weapon slung low. Below, the OCC locked down. Men sealed exits, radios alive with clipped chatter. And then the general himself walked into the atrium, his coat drawn close against the rain, eyes sweeping the rooftop. He didn't order pursuit, didn't shout. He only watched as the helicopter lifted into mist. His expression was stone, carved by something colder than rage. In Riley's ear, static swallowed Drake's signal. His voice erased, his presence gone. The helicopter banked west, skimming the edge of the skyline. Nora's voice returned, taut with urgency. "Gale is burned. Next vector is Hillsborough. Aegis Vector's holding Cole. We strike now or she's gone." Cole's jaw clenched, his grip tight enough to whiten his knuckles. His daughter's name hung heavy between them. Riley gave a single nod, then Hillsborough. They touched down short of the facility, skirting through dripping forest. Rain pattered steady, disguising the crunch of boots against mud. Ahead, floodlights glared off wire and steel towers. Guards patrolled arcs with precision. Riley's silencer clicked into place. Her breath was steady, her heartbeat was. A guard approached on routine. Riley slipped behind him, arm locked fast, chokehold precise. He folded without sound, lowered gently into shadows. Ward covered their flank, knife glinting quick. Another guard gone, body dragged into brush. "Thermals offline for 30 seconds, Nora whispered. "Move now." They slipped through a service door, entering a corridor that breathed cold. Servers hummed against reinforced walls. Red lights pulsed overhead. Cameras swept in slow arcs. Riley counted paces. Left, then right, then 3 doors down. She had memorized the map from Nora's feed. The detention wing loomed, sterile and silent. Behind reinforced glass, Cole sat shackled to a chair, eyes hollow but alive. His breath hitched over comms. "I see her." A guard rounded the corner. Riley's silencer barked once. He collapsed. The clattered, scooped it, unlocked the door. Stumbled into her father's arms. No words, only the weight of survival. But alarms erupted. Sirens howled, red strobes drowning the hall in bloody light. Doors slammed shut in waves, metal grates sealing corridors. "Extraction Delta," Nora snapped. "Loading bay now." They pushed hard, boots hammering metal. Riley fired bursts into shadows, clearing arcs for in. Tosta, the world seared white. They broke into the loading bay, rain pelting concrete, headlights strobing across asphalt. Beyond the chain-link fence, SUVs swarmed. And there, General. He stood bareheaded in the rain, calm, unmoving. His coat snapped in the wind like a flag. His eyes followed every step Riley made. He didn't order fire, didn't lift a hand, he simply watched. And then, almost imperceptibly, Mason Drake appeared in the shadows, half-lit by floodlight. He shifted just enough to block's view, buying them a sliver of escape. They slammed through the fence, reached the extraction vehicle Nora had primed, tires screamed, mud sprayed. The last thing Riley saw before the storm swallowed them was eyes, unblinking, calculating, not chasing, waiting. And beside him, Drake's silhouette vanished into doubt. Safe but shaking, unbroken, Drake neither ally nor enemy. And Riley knew nothing had been solved, only postponed. Why did the rain feel heavier here? Beaverton's industrial district lay under a steady curtain of storm, the kind that soaked through clothes and crawled into bone. Aegis Vector's server hub loomed ahead, squat concrete and glass, its perimeter wrapped in wire, floodlights glaring across steel like prison towers. To the casual eye, it was just another tech compound. To Riley, it looked like a fortress breathing in the dark. She crouched low beside and Cole in the shadows of a rail spur. Water dripped from her hood, pooling into mud. Nora's voice crackled in her earpiece, calm despite the static. Thermal grid rotates every 90 seconds. Window opens in 3, 2, 1. Go. They sprinted low, shadows cutting across asphalt. Clipped the fence with practiced precision, wires curling under his cutters. Cole slid through first, covering the arc with his carbine. Riley followed, her heart a metronome of silence and urgency. Inside, the air shifted, cold and sterile. The server floor stretched out like a canyon of steel towers. Endless racks hummed, blinking with coded light. Cold air pumped through vents, misting their breath into fog. The sound of their boots echoed faintly across tile, a rhythm too fragile against the thunder outside. Riley moved to a console, her gloves brushing across keys slick with condensation. Slot the drive, Nora guided. Pull package. Riley slid the encrypted chip into the port. Lines of code spilled across the screen, bleeding into raw detail, budgets, orders, covert footage of training accidents. Names. Lists of targets still alive. Her chest tightened. It wasn't rumor. It wasn't paranoia. Project was written in contracts. Each page another scar disguised as policy. Muttered beside her, voice heavy. This isn't a program, it's a blueprint for genocide. Riley scrolled faster, her pulse spiking. There were photographs, footage, stills of shooters walking away from accidents staged too clean. She recognized signatures, the angles of shots, the choices. Wasn't inventing ghosts, they were cloning shade. She swallowed against the knot in her throat. All those years she had buried the line, buried shade. Someone had unearthed her methods and stripped them of restraint. She wasn't just fighting an enemy. She was fighting her own reflection. A crash of steel split the silence. The team spun. Doors burst open. Security in black armor poured into the aisle, weapons raised. Suppressed fire cracked, sparks spraying as rounds chewed into server racks. Contact, Cole barked, already returning fire. The room erupted. Riley dropped low, rolling between towers, her spitting controlled bursts that stitched shadows red. Covered their flank with brutal efficiency, his movements a grim mirror of the man she used to know. Exit South Bay, Cole shouted. Move. They cut through narrow rows, dodging ricochets, weaving between towers. Sparks lit their faces in strobe. Riley vaulted a toppled server cart, dragging by the wrist, shielding her behind her own body. Each step felt borrowed, each breath stolen. The bay doors loomed ahead, half open, rain slicing in through the gap. Beyond, headlights speared the storm. Black SUVs lined the lot. Engines idled, their exhaust curling like smoke signals, and waiting bareheaded in the downpour stood General. He didn't flinch at the alarms screaming overhead, didn't shout, didn't lift a weapon. He stood like a monument, trench coat billowing, eyes locked on Riley. Her steps faltered for just a breath, his stillness cut sharper than any bullet. The team slowed instinctively. In the chaos, it was wrong, too quiet, too deliberate. For one heartbeat, no one fired, no one moved. And then turned away, slowly, deliberately. He raised one hand, palm low. The SUV stayed idle, Engines running, no pursuit, no chase. The choice was calculation, not mercy. Riley's gut twisted. He wasn't letting them go. He was simply letting them carry what he wanted carried. They bolted through the rain, reaching their vehicle, tires fishtailing across wet asphalt until the safe zone swallowed them. Riley sat in silence, water dripping from her hair, her breath unsteady. Nora's hands shook over her console as she patched into a secure uplink. The encrypted channel stabilized, and Deputy Secretary Lowell's voice crackled through, clipped but steady. "I have the packet. Confirm authenticity." "Confirmed," Nora said, her eyes locked on the screens. "Every detail cross-checks. Funding its targets, direct orders trace back to." Silence, the faint scratch of a pen against paper. Then Lowell's voice hardened. "Under Title 50 authority, I'm activating Operation Lantern, and his network are to be neutralized with immediate effect." The team exhaled, but only halfway. Orders signed on paper didn't end wars in shadows. They just moved the battlefield. Cole pulled close, her head resting against his shoulder. Relief softened his edges, the kind of relief only a father could know. For him, that moment was victory enough. But Riley's eyes stayed fixed on the window. The rain outside blurred into streaks, each drop carrying the weight of unfinished business. Drake was gone, no signal, no comms, no trace. Ally traitor, or something in between. The answer had slipped away into the storm, leaving only questions gnawing at her ribs. Later at Air Force Base, the hangars echoed hollow in the night. Riley walked alone down a corridor, her duffel brushing her leg. No insignia, no flag, just the weight of the ARC sigil burned into her hand. She reached an empty briefing room. The table sat cold, its surface bare. She set the symbol down flat, not a confession, not a plea, a promise. Shade was back in play. Not for headlines, not for medals. Only for the quiet, steady sound of boots against concrete. The hunt wasn't over. It had just begun. Why did silence feel more dangerous than the gunfire? The order had been signed, Operation Lantern, and his network marked for neutralization. But in the world Riley lived in, signatures on paper didn't stop bullets. They only shifted where they were aimed. Air Force Base pulsed with late-night operations. Cargo planes taxied under floodlights, their engines drowning the wind. Soldiers hurried in formation, heads down against the cold. To them, it was just another mission cycle. To Riley, it was something else. The start of a hunt with no clean ending. She stood by a hangar door, duffel heavy on her shoulder. Leaned against the wall beside her, scar catching the fluorescent light. Neither spoke for a long while. Finally broke the quiet, "You shouldn't be here." Riley glanced at him, her jaw tight. "Neither should you." His chuckle was low, humorless. "Difference is, I never pretended to be dead." The words cut sharper than a knife. Riley looked away, staring at the runway where a transport lifted into the night. "You let me bury you." "You let me stay buried," said. His eyes never left her face. Shade was gone. Maybe that's what you wanted. She swallowed hard. There was no answer that didn't bleed. Cole appeared from the shadows, close behind him. The girl's face was pale, eyes wide from everything she'd endured. She clung to her father's sleeve, silent but present. Cole looked older in that moment, his relief at her survival tempered by the weight of knowing the storm hadn't passed. "We move east," he said. "Nora's mapped supply nodes. Cut them and his network bleeds. We can't just wait for Lantern to tidy up." Nodded once, "Then we're first." Nora's voice came over comms, clipped and urgent. "Newark's ghost accounts are cycling through a broker there. You hit that hub, you starve his funding." Cole shifted his grip on shoulder. Too hot for her, she stays back. His eyes flashed. "I'm not cargo." Her voice cracked but carried steel. Riley saw the fire in her, the echo of her father's stubbornness. But Cole shook his head, not as a commander, but as a father who had nearly lost everything. "You survived once," he said. "Don't make me gamble again." The argument ended in silence, a compromise none of them liked. Hours later, the skyline of Newark burned against night. The city was alive in neon, its streets slick with rain. From a rooftop, Riley watched the glow ripple across puddles, her rifle pressed cold against her shoulder. Not the M24, something lighter, unregistered, borrowed from the shadows of Cole's contacts. Below, an office tower pulsed with light. Too many floors, too many windows. Somewhere inside, money moved like blood through arteries. His voice murmured in her ear. 2 guards at the west entry, 3 more rotating on the roof. "Window?" she asked. 2 minutes. Cole crouched beside her, hands wrapped around a suppressed carbine. His jaw was set, but his eyes carried something else, fear. Not for himself, for what would happen if this failed. They slipped down the fire escape, boots slick against rusted steel. At the base, rain washed the street clean, leaving only the hiss of tires in the distance. The west entry loomed ahead. The 2 guards barely had time to register motion before a knife flashed, silent and sure. Riley slipped through the doorway, heartbeat steady, her breath a rhythm she controlled. Inside, the air hummed with fluorescent buzz and computer fans. Desks lined the walls, monitors glowing with numbers that meant nothing to civilians but everything to anyone chasing war money. Nora's voice threaded in. 4th floor, server room, that's where the accounts cycle. The stairwell echoed with their steps. Riley moved first, weapon ready. Each corner cleared, each door passed. Her body remembered drills long after her mind wished it didn't. On the 4th floor, the door cracked open under shoulder. The room inside glowed cold with blue light. Servers blinked in lines, their fans whispering like 1,000 breaths. Riley slid the drive into the port. Code spilled across the screen, Nora guiding each keystroke. "Redirecting funds now. Hold me 30 seconds." But 30 seconds was a lifetime. The door banged open. Black-clad operators poured in, weapons raised. Gunfire shredded the quiet. Riley dropped low, rounds chewing sparks from the racks around her. Cole answered with bursts, controlled and heavy, pushing them back. Dove behind a server tower, muzzle flashes strobing his face. Riley returned fire, each shot deliberate. 2 operators fell. A 3rd staggered, his weapon clattering. The rest pulled back, regrouping. Nora's voice was frantic in their ears. "Almost there, 10 seconds." The firefight narrowed. Riley's breath came sharp, her body moving on instinct. For a second she felt the ghost return. Shade was alive in her veins, steady, merciless, unstoppable. Then the screen flashed green. Nora shouted, "Funds redirected, pull out now." They fell back hard, smoke curling through the room. Down stairwells, through corridors, into the wet night. Sirens wailed in the distance. Riley didn't look back. By the time they reached their extraction vehicle, Riley's lungs burned. Rain plastered her hair against her face. Cole slammed the door shut behind them, his chest heaving. Nora's voice came through, calmer now. "Coffers are cut, at least the ones we could touch, but he'll adapt, he always does." Riley leaned her head back against the seat, her chest rising and falling. The glow of Newark slipped away behind them, but her thoughts stayed tangled. Every step they took seemed to let them. Every move felt calculated, as if they were pieces on his board. And Drake, his absence cut deeper than any bullet. Was he the reason they survived, or the reason always seemed one step ahead? The SUV pushed into the dark, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Finally spoke, his voice quiet but heavy. "Shade, you need to decide something." Her eyes opened slowly. "What?" "Whether you're here to run from the past or finish what you started." The words lingered, cutting deeper than any order, because Riley knew the answer was buried in scars she hadn't touched in years. The rain kept falling. The hunt pressed on, and somewhere ahead waited, not chasing, not hiding, but watching, always watching. Why did every silence feel like betrayal? The SUV hummed down the highway, rain streaking against its windows in endless lines. Inside, no one spoke for miles. Each carried the weight of survival, of choices that didn't feel like victories. Riley stared out at the blur of neon dissolving into dark forests, her reflection ghosting back at her from the glass. Shade stared back at her, and she wasn't sure which face belonged to her anymore. Cole finally broke the silence. Isn't rattled, he's adjusting, that's worse. Sitting across from him, nodded grimly. He let us bleed his money, means he's confident he can rebuild faster than we can cut. Nora's voice cut in over comms. She rooted herself into their system audio. Then we find his leak. He's been ahead of us at every turn, too precise. Somebody in this vehicle is feeding him. The words dropped like stones in water. The vehicle seemed to shrink, every pair of eyes flicking to the others. Sat pressed against her father's side, silent, her eyes darting between faces. Cole's jaw tightened. Not her. His voice was iron. Nora didn't flinch. I wasn't suggesting, but someone. Riley felt it coil in her gut. She had been here before. Rooms where every shadow held knives, where trust wasn't currency but bait. She hated how natural it felt to measure each person in silence. Leaned forward, his face set in stone. Drake's gone. His comms died at the gala. Either he cut himself loose or cut him, and if he's feeding intel, it explains everything. Riley's chest tightened. She wanted to agree, wanted to believe the suspicion. But she also remembered the way Drake had stepped into his line of sight at Hillsborough, the half-second gift that bought their escape. That didn't look like betrayal. It looked like sacrifice. But sacrifice could be, and was a weapon mastered. Her voice finally broke the silence. We don't know, we can't assume. Cole's gaze cut into her hard. Shade, you've lived in shadows longer than any of us. Tell me, how many people walk away clean from programs like Line? The question hung in the air, a knife without a handle. Riley looked away, her throat too tight for an answer. Hours later, the SUV rolled into an abandoned airstrip north of Denver. There was nothing but a corrugated hangar on cracked concrete, its roof sagging under years of neglect. Inside, it smelled of oil and dust, the silence echoing against steel walls. Nora was already there, hunched over her equipment, screens lighting her face in cold blue. She didn't look up when the team entered. I've been combing every channel. Chatter increased after Newark. He's rerouting assets west. And there's one more thing. She tapped a key. A photo filled the largest screen, grainy, captured from surveillance. Drake, his outline in a crowd, walking beside two men flagged as operatives. The hangar went still. His voice was low, edged with vindication. There's your leak. Riley stepped closer to the screen. The image was blurred, rain streaking the lens. The man looked like Drake, yes, the shoulders, the posture, but images lied. She knew that better than anyone. Or bait, Riley said quietly. Doesn't need bullets to kill us, just doubt. Cole slammed a hand against the table, the sound ricocheting. Shade, we can't keep giving Drake the benefit of doubt. If he's playing both sides, his life, our lives, are already compromised. Flinched at the crack of his hand, but said nothing. Her silence weighed heavier than words. Nora's fingers tapped fast against the keys. Either way, the next node is real. It's moving something through not money this time, people, operatives trained under. Riley felt the air tighten. Deployed. Test run, Nora said. Sending them across borders, embedding them in cities. He's not planning assassinations anymore. He's planning occupation. His eyes flicked to Riley. You know what that means. He's not just cloning Shade, he's scaling Shade. The words pierced her like glass. She had built her life on precision, on carrying a ghost's burden that no one else could understand. And now was turning that into an assembly line. A factory of killers, stripped of hesitation, stripped of soul. Shade had been one scar, would be an epidemic. That night Riley couldn't sleep. She sat alone in the corner of the hangar, her back against cold steel, the M24 disassembled across her lap. Her hands worked through each piece like prayer, not maintenance. Her mind circled back to Drake, the way he'd looked at her in the armory, the way he'd said her call sign aloud, the way he'd slid the evidence packet into her hand at the gala. Was he saving her, or was he setting her up? The question burned deeper than the missions, deeper than, because Riley knew the truth she couldn't admit to the others. She wanted to believe in Drake, not because he'd earned it, but because she needed one reason not to believe she was alone. The rain outside drummed against the roof, a rhythm steady, endless. Shadow loomed at the edge of her vision. He didn't speak at first, just crouched beside her, watching her hands move across steel. "You're slipping back into shade," he said finally. His voice was quiet, not accusing. Her hands stilled, she didn't look up. "Shade doesn't care who betrays who," continued. "Shade doesn't care about leaks or trust. Shade only finishes the mission. That's what scares me." Riley's throat tightened. Maybe that's all there's left. Shook his head. "No, because if that's all you are, then already won. He's not trying to kill Shade. He's trying to prove he can build her better." The words lingered long after he walked away. Riley stared down at the rifle in her hands, the arc sigil etched into its stock. For years she had buried Shade, convinced that burying meant healing. But now she wasn't sure if Shade was gone or if Shade had just been waiting. The storm outside deepened, and in its rhythm Riley felt the pulse of something she couldn't quiet. Not anger, not fear, something more dangerous. Resolve. Why did the border lights look like cages? El shimmered under desert heat by day and neon glow by night, a city straddling lines drawn in politics and blood. But tonight, under a low sky thick with dust and cloud, it felt like something else, a crucible. The kind of place where shadows weren't cast, they were born. The SUV stopped short of a freight yard on the city's edge. Rusted boxcars stretched in crooked lines, floodlights glaring against steel and asphalt. From their vantage, Riley saw men moving in formation. Too sharp, too silent. Not smugglers, not soldiers, something in between. Muttered, his voice carried the weight of recognition. Nora's feed confirmed it, her voice crackling over comms. Thermals show 12 operatives. Gear is civilian cut but patterned. Embedding them in transit. Tonight, they vanish across borders. Cole's jaw set tight. They disappear here, they reappear in cities that don't even know their names. This isn't deployment, this is seeding. Riley's chest constricted. Through her scope, she watched one operative move, the angle of his shoulders, the way he adjusted his weapon. It was wrong and it was familiar. They weren't just efficient. They were echoes of her. Shade. Her pulse quickened. They're not soldiers, they're shadows. His eyes flicked to her, catching the edge in her tone. He didn't need to ask what she meant. The team spread out, slipping between rusted cars and pools of shadow. Boots pressed into gravel without sound. The night held its breath. At the perimeter, 2 guards paced. Riley pressed against steel, her silencer clicking into place. Breath in, aim steady. 2 shots. 2 bodies folded, lowered before the sound could travel. Her heart didn't spike. Her pulse didn't stutter. It felt like stepping back into shoes she'd never really taken off. They moved deeper. Floodlight beams carved through the yard, cutting shapes across rust and dirt. Riley raised her hand, signaling halt. Ahead, a cluster of operatives loaded crates into a truck. Their movements were synchronized, their silence eerie. Cole whispered, "We take the truck, burn the shipment." "No," Riley said sharply. "Not enough, won't care about cargo. These men are the shipment." The words stilled them. The reality sank deeper than any order. Wasn't moving weapons. He was moving ghosts. Nora's voice came low but urgent. "Decision time. I can lock their comms, but once I do, they'll know. 30 seconds before they adapt." looked at Riley waiting, Shade's call. Her breath hung heavy in her chest, then she gave the nod. Do it. The air shifted. In Riley's ear, static flared. The operatives below stiffened, hands twitching toward weapons, eyes scanning. Then chaos snapped loose. Gunfire erupted, sharp and controlled. Shadows scattered, each operative moving with precision too exact to be coincidence. They didn't fight like recruits, they fought like reflections. Riley dropped low, muzzle barking fire. One operative lunged from cover, movements eerily familiar, the same pivot, the same shoulder drop she had used countless times. Her shot landed center mass, but he didn't fall instantly. He fought gravity, fought silence, until the second shot cut him down. Her stomach turned. It was like killing a mirror. Cole laid suppressive fire, his face hard. They're too clean. His voice cracked over comms, tension raw. Shade, these aren't soldiers, these are you. The words cut through her ribs. She knew it already, but hearing them out loud made it real. Each operative was a ghost of line, stripped of hesitation, stripped of humanity. Riley pushed forward, weaving between boxcars, her shots measured, efficient. Not because she wanted to be, because her body remembered, because Shade had never left. One by one the operatives fell, but not without cost, staggered behind cover, a graze searing his arm. Cole dragged him back, muzzle flashing. Trucks rolling, Nora shouted in their ears. Riley spun. One operative had slipped into the cab, engine roaring. Tires squealed against gravel, headlights blazing. The truck lunged forward, aiming not to escape but to crush. Riley sprinted into the open. Rain slicked the asphalt. Her barked, shots cracking through glass. The driver jerked, slamming against the wheel. The truck swerved, tires shrieking, and slammed into a row of cars with a thunderous crash. Fire bloomed, painting the yard in orange light. The blast heat pressed against her face, against her chest. Her ears rang. But she kept moving, dragging from Cole's grip, hauling him toward cover. The yard was carnage. Operatives sprawled in pools of blood and fire. But even dying, their faces were calm. No fear, no doubt, just silence. And in that silence, Riley felt the weight. These weren't men who chose. These were men built, copies of her worst self. The team regrouped behind cover, breaths ragged, clothes scorched with smoke. Nora's voice cracked through, sharp but trembling. Knows that was the test run. You stopped the shipment, but he has more. This isn't over, it's beginning. His eyes locked on Riley, searching her face. How do we fight him if every time we pull the trigger, it feels like killing you? She had no answer, only the fire reflected in her eyes. The night was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence after a warning. And Riley knew it was operatives they had just fought. It was message. He wasn't just building shadows. He was telling her, you can't outrun yourself. Why did the final hunt feel quiet? After all, the team didn't rest. They couldn't. Had shown his hand, and the message was clear. He didn't fear exposure. He was building something bigger than secrecy could contain. The SUV pushed north, desert fatting into mountains, mountains giving way to forests. Each mile carried more silence than words. Cole drove, his knuckles white against the wheel, leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion tugging at her eyes but never pulling her fully into sleep. Stared out the window, jaw tight, bandage soaking slowly through his sleeve. And Riley sat in the back, the M24 across her knees, not as contraband, not as memory, as anchor. Shade was no longer hidden in closets or whispers. Shade sat with her in plain sight. Nora's voice cut into the silence. I've cracked one of the back channels. Isn't running, he's staging. He'll be at Rainier, Aegis Vector's retreat facility. It's a stronghold, not an office. And he wants you to come. Cole cursed under his breath. A trap. Of course it's a trap, muttered. That's the point. Riley's voice was quiet, steady. Then we go. The facility rose like teeth against the tree line, concrete and glass, windows blacked, floodlights sweeping arcs across the compound. It wasn't corporate. It wasn't military. It was something in between, stitched together by money and secrets. The approach was silent, boots sinking into pine needles, the forest swallowing their sound. Riley led, rifle steady, eyes cutting every angle. Cole covered rear, kept point on their flank, stayed behind in the SUV, guarded by Nora's remote eyes. At the perimeter fence, Riley raised a hand. Beyond, the courtyard glowed harsh under halogen lamps, and in the center, as if waiting for them, stood a figure in a trench coat. He wasn't flanked. He wasn't hiding. He stood bareheaded in the rain, watching the fence line like a man who had invited guests, not enemies. "Shade," he called, voice carrying across steel and storm. "You've come home." The words lanced through her, sharp and deliberate. They breached fast, cutting through fence, moving low, but didn't raise a hand. He didn't call guards, he simply watched. When Riley stepped into the light, the rain streaked her face, her rifle raised but steady. Smiled faintly, not with victory but recognition. "Line was proof of concept," he said. "One ghost, one shade, but you," his eyes gleamed. "You were never the end, you were the beginning." Her throat tightened. "You turned people into copies, you stripped choice." His voice was calm, almost paternal. "Choice is the enemy of precision, you know that. Every kill you made as Shade, you didn't hesitate. That's why you were perfect. That's why they feared you. All I've done is remove the weakness of doubt." Barked back, his voice raw. "You built puppets. You built death without conscience." His gaze never left Riley. "And tell me, was Shade ever different? Did she doubt? Or did she just pull the trigger?" The question hit harder than any bullet. Her hands trembled against the rifle stock, because she remembered every mission, every shot. The stillness inside her when she pulled the trigger, it hadn't felt like hesitation. It had felt like inevitability. Took a step closer, rain glistening against his coat. "You are proof. You are my validation. Without you, Shade, there is no." And then, movement at the edge of light. Mason Drake. His silhouette emerged from shadow, weapon lowered, eyes locked on Riley. For a moment, no one breathed. Cole raised his rifle, snarling, "Knew it, traitor." Drake shook his head once, slow. "No, not traitor, leverage." He dropped something into the light, a hard drive, waterproof casing from use. "Needed me close to keep Shade moving toward him. But everything he gave me, every file, every order, it's all here." Nora's voice cracked over comms, shock thick in it. "If that's real, if that's authentic, it's enough to bury him." Smile didn't falter. He almost looked amused. "And yet, Shade, you'll never know if Drake is your savior or my pawn. You'll spend the rest of your life doubting. That's my victory." The words hung in the storm, heavy, poisonous. Riley's rifle didn't move. Her breath came sharp, steady. She thought of the gala of Philadelphia, of every name scrolled across Nora's files. She thought of Scar, Cole's silence, hollow eyes. She thought of Shade, the ghost she had been, the ghost wanted. And she understood. Her voice was steady, low. "You're wrong." Tilted his head. "Am I?" Riley's eyes didn't leave his. Shade wasn't perfect because she didn't doubt. She was dangerous because she doubted and chose anyway. What you've built, these operatives, they'll never be more than empty chambers, tools without weight, ghosts without scars, and scars are the only thing that make us human. The silence after her words was heavier than the rain. Smile faltered just slightly, a crack in stone. And in that crack, Riley felt something shift. They didn't need gunfire to win. They needed truth, truth spoken aloud, undeniable. Took one more step, but this time his eyes carried something new. Not triumph, not calm, something closer to fear. Drake tossed the drive across the wet concrete. Riley caught it, cold and heavy in her hands. Proof. Didn't move to stop her. He simply stood there, the rain streaking his face like war paint, his silence a confession. The team pulled back. No shots fired. No bodies left, just the drive clutched in Riley's grip and the sound of boots against wet concrete. Hours later, and lit by a single bulb, Nora confirmed the files. Empire laid bare. Funding chains, training logs, deployment orders. All authentic, all damning. Deputy Secretary Lowell's voice came through the secure channel again, this time sharp and final. Is finished. Operation Lantern moves tonight. You've done enough. Riley sat apart from the others, the M24 resting against the wall, her hands clasped tight. The words felt hollow, might fall, but shadows never disappeared. They only shifted. Approached, his voice softer now. You did it. Riley shook her head. No, we only slowed him. There will always be another. Crouched, meeting her eyes. Then maybe the point isn't stopping them forever. Maybe the point is proving they can be stopped at all. Her chest tightened. Not victory, not closure, but something close to hope. Outside, dawn broke, pale light spilling across wet ground. The storm had passed, but the world still glistened with its scars. Riley stood, shouldering the M24 one last time. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't pretending. Shade wasn't just a ghost. Shade was a reminder of choice, of scars, of weight. And sometimes dignity didn't speak. It simply acted,